Welcome to the Might Habits podcast. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, a pretty big question. How do you actually get rich in today's economy?
It's a huge topic.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking at, different ideas about building wealth, but also, crucially, the hurdles people face, especially if they don't start with inherited money.
Right, and maybe exploring some other ways to think about what financial well-being even means. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, so it's interesting, this question, how to get rich, it comes up a lot. Online, face-to-face, people ask it constantly.
Like asking how to get fit or learn Spanish, maybe something straightforward.
Well, that's the initial thought, maybe.
All right.
But the source material we're looking at argues it's way more complex than that, much more tangled.
Yeah.
In fact, the claim is pretty bold. It says the most sort of reliable way to get rich now is just to have a rich dad.
Wow, okay. That paints a picture of, well, limited social mobility, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests that, yeah. And there's this personal story shared from someone who was a successful trader like between 2008 and 2014,
Ah, interesting timing.
post-crash.
Exactly. But this person really emphasizes how incredibly hard it's become now for someone from, an ordinary background to get into that professional trading world.
Even with good grades, talent.
Apparently, that's often not enough anymore. There's even this anecdote. They had to win a national card game. A card game. Just to secure their trading job back then.
Seriously, a card game, that's unusual.
Tells you something, right? And the main point is, that person doesn't believe their own path, that route they took, is really repeatable for most people today.
So that door is kind of closed, or at least much harder to open.
That seems to be the argument.
Hmm?
And that experience, it kind of shaped how they view giving out personal trading advice, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, they apparently tried to help some friends, give them insights. This was around the start of the pandemic, predicting rises in house prices, gold, stuff like that.
And were they right?
Initially, yeah, the predictions were pretty spot on, but the friends, they actually ended up losing money.
Oh, no. How did that happen if the advice was good? Because they didn't just stick to the plan. They started doing a lot of extra trading, kind of going off-piste into silver, platinum, even crypto, without, proper guidance.
Ah, okay. So getting carried away, maybe. The psychology of it all.
Exactly. And that whole experience, it kind of led this person to conclude that teaching trading to most individuals, it might actually be irresponsible, maybe even dangerous,
Dangerous. Why?
because it's just inherently difficult.
Mm.
And those psychological factors you mentioned, they're huge. It's not just about numbers. And
Exactly.
Source even compares trading to gambling, basically. Cites statistics, about how many retail trading accounts lose money. It's a high percentage.
And the professionals.
They're often on the other side of those losing trades. That's the implication. So there's real concern voiced about pushing trading as, like, the way for young people to build wealth.
Yeah, you see that online a lot. Get rich quick through trading.
Right. And this perspective suggests that's problematic. Which leads into the next point, really. These broader structural barriers.
Structural barriers. You mean things beyond individual effort.
Precisely. The argument is that the sort of legitimate ways people traditionally got rich, they're largely blocked now, especially for the younger generation.
Blocked how? Like, just working a job isn't enough.
That's the contention, yeah.
Yep.
That in the current climate, becoming genuinely wealthy through employment alone is, well, almost impossible for most.
So, if not work, then what?
Inheritance. That's presented as the main driver, often invisible, but incredibly powerful.
Especially with things like buying a house.
Exactly. The source points out the massive difference it makes. Someone getting a big chunk of cash from their parents to buy property versus someone from a poorer background trying to save that kind of deposit. It's just worlds apart.
Yeah, you can see that playing out. The deposit hurdle is huge.
And there's a critique here about society, how it puts pressure on younger people without that family wealth. Makes them feel like failures, even though the system itself is stacked against them.
That's a heavy thought, feeling like a failure because of systemic issues.
It is. And the source doesn't mince words. It describes the current economic system as basically rigged against those who don't inherit wealth.
Rigged. That's strong language.
It is. And the advice given is pretty direct, too. It suggests listeners should try to accept this reality, maybe stop blaming themselves so much for their financial situation, because it's increasingly down to factors they just can't control.
Like where you start from.
Exactly. It mentions this idea of, like, micro-scale mobility. Maybe you do a bit better than your parents, move up slightly within your bracket.
Okay.
but argues there's very little macro competitiveness, meaning you're not really competing on a level playing field with the truly wealthy, those with inherited advantages.
And what are the consequences of this rigged system, as the source calls it?
Well, it points to a real negative impact on young people's mental health, for one.
Mm.
The constant pressure, the feeling of inadequacy,
I can imagine that.
and also potentially a depoliticizing effect. If everyone's just focused on their own individual struggle to get ahead, maybe they're less likely to think about collective action, about changing the system itself.
So keep everyone scrambling individually so they don't team up.
That's kind of the implication. The source uses the phrase robbed blind by the system while simultaneously being encouraged to just compete harder against each other.
Wow. Okay, so if the system is rigged and individual effort isn't enough, what's the solution proposed?
The core message is pretty clear. The only real long-term fix for widespread financial well-being isn't individual striving, it's changing the rules of the game, collectively.
Changing the rules? How?
Policy changes are advocated for, things like higher taxes on the very wealthy, maybe lower taxes on others. The goal being to reshape the economy so that, hard work can actually lead to financial security again, like maybe it used to.
So systemic change, not just individual hustle.
Exactly. And there's a call to action in there too, urging people to value their work, their contributions, by measures other than just money.
Because being poor isn't necessarily a personal failing.
Right. It's often, according to this view, a result of a system that's flawed, not just about individual inadequacy.
So the conclusion is, we need to work together.
Pretty much.
Mm.
That true wealth, perhaps, lies in that collective effort to reform things. He frames it as a choice, really.
Which is?
Either be born rich or get together and change the rules.
That definitely leaves you with something to think about.
It does. And maybe the question for you, the listener, to ponder is, what does it really mean if wealth is increasingly a powerful way about who your parents are, not what you do?
Hmm.
And thinking about that power of collective action, could that be the key to tackling these systemic inequalities? And maybe even redefining what success and value actually mean in our society today?